And to think the New York Metropolitans started out this ball game up 2-0 and actually had themselves some quality at-bats against Paul Skenes. What if I told you that same exact ball game where the Mets were up 2-0, again, for now the fourth time in their past 5 losses, as now the Mets have lost 5 of their past 7 games. They give up the lead here in embarrassing fashion, and they are embarrassed like never before. For the first time this season, tying a Pittsburgh Pirates single season record. I apologize for the tongue twisters, folks, but I'm about to let so much loose here in tonight's post-game show I cannot begin to tell you, as the Mets are beyond embarrassed by the Pittsburgh Pirates by a final score that we see tonight, 14-2. In today's show, we're not only going to break down everything that transpired inning by inning in this godforsaken ball game, you call one for the New York Metropolitans here, but we're ultimately going to break down how this was a disaster from the start here for a Mets team that, again, has some things working early. So why was Luis Severino as horrendous as he was? And why, and I cannot put a further emphasis than what I'm about to say, earmuffs, kiddos. Again, it's going to get a little loud for a second. Why is Jake Diekman still in this bullpen? Was it, I don't know, just a couple games ago we saw Jake Diekman exactly why he shouldn't be in this bullpen? I don't care that you're down a man in this pen. Jake Diekman has done nothing but be a negative for this Mets team more often than not this season. Luis Severino, of course, did absolutely zero favors, everybody. How you doing, folks? It's your boy Wardy, and we're back at it with the latest post-game segment, and this is going to be a mixture of a Wardy rant, a vent session with you fellow Mets fans, breaking down this, again, horrendous ball game, and how the Mets, again, managed to be outscored here 14-2. The bullpen woes continue. Edwin Diaz is back from his suspension tomorrow, but it only means so much when you see this Mets team free fall the way that they have, dropping 5 of their past 7 games, all games for the most part in which they at some point had a solid grasp of securing a victory in said ball game. Before this thing from the truth, we're going to break it all down, folks. We got a lot to say. I'm absolutely sweating bullets, and I apologize, folks. I'm out of town, as I told many of you, for the weekend here, so the setup isn't exactly how I normally do things, but hopefully the audio is bearable. I know I have a crazy echo in the room that I'm currently in, so I apologize for that in advance. But everybody first chiming in live on a replay, happy to have you all in here, folks. We have so much to discuss here and what was a shit show of a ball game for the Mets, and there's a lot of takeaways in this one. This is not one of those games where I say, okay, you just throw it in the trash, it means nothing. No, this game actually has substance to it and how to react as a Mets fan because of how depleted not only this bullpen is right now, but how the pitching woes are continuing to become these pitching woes as a whole, a collective unit, are continuing to become an issue for this Mets team. And again, a team that was 11 games below 500 this season did such a great job on clawing themselves out of the rut that they found themselves in, but in a very mediocre 500 ball club way, the Mets have now again dropped 5 of their past 7 games and are now a couple games below 500. Cameron Kier with the $5 donation. Thank you so much for that, Cameron. Cameron says, I'll be here tomorrow. I'm not looking forward to it at all. Totally expecting them to get swept in the series. I don't expect the Mets to get swept in a 4-game set. God willing, that doesn't happen, obviously. But I wish you the absolute best of luck tomorrow. Again, tomorrow might be the best chance the Mets have outside of depending on who starts for the Pirates this Sunday, because Jared Jones, thankfully for the Mets case, will not be pitching, but it's unfortunate because he's out with an injury, has a grade 2 strain. He's not going to pitch for 2 weeks. I'm wishing Jones the absolute best in his recovery. But we got Bailey Falter, the southpaw, against David Pearson, fellow southpaw, tomorrow. Sunday, it is a no name as of now for the Pirates, barring any changes. And then, of course, there on Monday, we got Mitch Keller versus Christian Scott. Thank you for that donation, and good luck in Pittsburgh tomorrow. Dave, thank you so much for the donation. I appreciate that. You hit a homer. You hit a homer. 2 slams. Yes, you heard that correctly. That is how god-awful of a ball game this was from the Mets here. We saw the Pittsburgh Pirates rip 2 grand slams. 7 home runs, everybody. 7. There is nothing, and I mean nada, to justify such a horrendous outing we saw by the Mets collectively today. And it was such a tale of 2 ball games versus the first couple innings what you saw between the Mets and Skenes versus this Pirates offense. Mind you, the Pittsburgh Pirates have one of the worst offenses in all the National League, one of the worst offenses in all of Major League Baseball, and they just put up a 14-piece on this Mets team like it was another day of the week, like it was absolutely nothing. We got fans in the chat saying sell, sell, sell. They don't want to see them buying at all at the deadline, and I understand that, and I understand the pessimism is always going to come in a time like this when the Mets aren't doing well. I'm not surprised by that by any stretch here. We're going to talk about what this means for the Mets here going forward here shortly. AZ with a $2 haul. Thank you so much. Word cannot describe how disgusted I am right now. You and I both, my man. But that's why we're here breaking down this ball game together in our latest post-game rant, vent session, whatever the hell you want to call it. All I want to say is we got a lot to break down. I'm sweating bullets, and this Mets team just took another year off my life. Frustrating loss here a day after, of course, 4th of July, where the Mets had nothing to show on the offensive end because that 11 a.m. start meant for both the Nationals and Mets, we're just not going to swing bats today. And then when the Mets, of course, were swinging, they was going right in the gloves for lineouts, and they only had one hit on the day as they lost to Jesse Winker 1-0 yesterday. We fast forward a day later, you're facing the big, the bad, the towering Paul Skenes. Paul Skenes looked hittable today. This was not a pitcher that I looked at facing the Mets and said, oh my goodness gracious, the Mets have no chance of hitting against him. No, they had some quality at-bats against Paul Skenes, but once he got the game back tied after the Mets went up 2-0, he got himself in a groove, retired 8+ straight batters before exiting this ball game, and for the second time this season, the great young Paul Skenes went 7 strong innings. So yes, I understood from the start the Mets had themselves a tall task with this pitching matchup between Luis Severino and Paul Skenes just based on the two alone, but did I think that the Mets were going to get shelled the way that they did today? Farthest thing from the truth. It took me by surprise, and as soon as I saw Jake Diekman come in this ball game, bases loaded and no out here that we saw for Luis Severino, I knew it was absolutely the nail in the coffin. There was not a chance in hell this Mets team would come back. Jake Diekman would do exactly what you think, be absolutely useless, giving up a grand slam, 1 of 2 on the day from the Pittsburgh Pirates, and again, the Mets go on to lose this one 14-2. We're going to break down this inning by inning here in a second, everybody, but continue to smash a like and subscribe on as your first time, and greatly appreciate it. AZ with a $2 donation says, words cannot describe how disgusted I am right now. You and I both, AZ. You and I both. Scott with the $5 haul says, DFA haven't already been a Mets fan since 85. Worst pitching staff I've ever seen. Sevy needs to stop fanboying, oh my god, and actually pitch. I agree. Sevy was horrendous today. Holy shit. If you could have counted, I mean, we did count, rather, how many fastballs Severino threw today, but he had no confidence, no comfortability whatsoever at any of his pitches, and he was just hammering that heater in the zone, and the Pirates were eating up for breakfast. You know what? It's easy to get the amount of runs the Pirates had today against Severino in particular, because once Severino isn't getting out of that bases loaded jam unscathed, I find that very hard to believe. But two, Severino was so horrendous with a flat heater today that, again, all you had to do was sit and you knew good things were going to come. From the pitching standpoint, this team was god-awful start to finish for the most part that we saw today. On the offensive end, they were up early and then they had nothing to show after a tied ball game. And again, Paul Skenes is very good. We know this, but then when you get deflated giving up a grand slam halfway through this ball game or so, you can't expect the Mets offense to just ultimately be like, okay, we're going to wake up right now. Not going to happen. But if there's one thing I will gripe about on the offensive end, why are you not starting Mark Vientos? There is nothing to justify not starting Mark Vientos in this game, but we're going to bat DJ Stewart fifth. We're going to do that again, right? Even though that he provides little to nothing on the offensive end. What, he gives us a home run every 3 weeks? Oh, what do you have me do? So happy we have him on the roster still. And again, this is nothing personal against Teddy Bear DJ himself, but this guy can barely command right or left field, obviously. Defensively is a standalone DH, barely gets playing time, yet we're having this guy bat fifth today. McNeil in the lineup, I can't even gripe about because he was one of the lone offensive helps from the Mets, as he was yesterday with the Mets lone hit, so I'm not going to nitpick him too much there right now, even though you guys know how I feel about Jeff and the beyond underwhelming and ridiculous season he's had in his own right on the offensive end, lack thereof. But between the lineup configuration, which I wasn't in favor of to begin with, imagine having Mark Vientos on the bench today when he is quite literally one of your hottest hitters and has been all season long, as if he can't face Paul Skenes and his velocity when Mark Vientos, the reason why he's had as much success as he's had this season is because of his ability to catch up to MLB caliber pitching. Something Brett Beatty doesn't know all that well, especially when it comes to lifting the ball consistently. Again, I thought it was a bonehead lineup today, and the pitching did the Mets absolutely no favors. This was a collective group of a shit show of an outing, both on the offensive and defensive side of the ball. Yes, I do feel like we have reached that point point where the death of Grimace has happened, as much as that pains me to say, Mets fans. And speaking of death, speaking of being murdered, speaking of being killed here, let's talk about the Mets here for a second. I mean, seriously, all jokes aside just for a minute, because when we take a look here, especially, guys, we're going to deep dive on the pitching end. Look at just how horrendous these numbers are. Luis Severino, his ERA jumped from 3.4 to 3.8. Again, do I think he gives up all those runs there if he stays in the ball game? No. Diekman is quite literally the worst reliever on the planet right now. But outside of that, I didn't have confidence in Severino in that inning either way. And it's fitting for the Mets to allow Sevy to allow a bases-loaded situation late in this ball game when it's still a 2-run deficit that the Mets are still within reach here, to allow that to happen before making the change. I thought that was boneheaded too. Even with a depleted bullpen, Sevy didn't have it, and that was a problem. Diekman absolutely useless. We're going to get into Adcock and why this is probably more than likely the last you saw of him in this Mets bullpen. Then on the hitting end, a lot of zeros, baby. Call Homer Simpson so he can get some donuts, because that's what you saw on this, again, horrendous showing by the Mets today, as they would falter by a final score of 14-2. It's because of those damn JD cleats, says 5-speed in the chat. That's funny, everybody. But all right, folks, the first thing I want to see from everybody that's watching live, that's watching the comments down below on replay, I want to know your initial reactions to this shit show of a ball game, everybody. Again, I apologize for the profanity there for a second. Also, apologies in advance for my intro running for just a hot second or two. That won't happen again, folks. Shout out to my amazing sponsors, as always, at BetUS, and, of course, so are MLB. But about them a little bit later in the show, folks. If there's one positive I can share with each and every one of you before we get rolling here in the show, breaking down inning by inning and ranting our head offs and venting the way we're about to do, I can tell you that we are going to shed some light on the prospect end, and how Brandon Sproat, of course, newly crowned top 100 prospect, one of the best starting pitching prospects in Major League Baseball, had himself yet another dominant outing yesterday in Double-A Binghamton. We will break him down at great length, thanks to my great friend Isaac Groffman, who's going to have our nightly pitching report all about Mr. Brandon Sproat and nothing about Luis Severino, because we all know what we saw with Sevy today, and it was pretty easy to evaluate why he was frustrating as much as he certainly was in said matchup. But before we wrap up the show, we will get into a bit on the prospect end, highlighting Brandon Sproat's brilliance, Ryan Clifford, what he did yesterday too. If there were any standouts on the prospect end as well today that we saw in the minor leagues, we will touch on them too. Just remind me, guys, to make sure that I don't go on too much of a rant and miss it entirely here. Diekman is an idiot, Stearns, man. I mean, here's what I will say. As much as I've been happy with David Stearns, the Jake Diekman pickup was not one of them. But here's also the thing. Jake Diekman was supposed to be the Mets' secondary southpaw option in this bullpen. Brooks Raley being injured for the entire season was the first big killer for the sake of Jake Diekman, his usage, and the Mets in this pen. Then you add in Edwin Diaz being suspended 10 games, so you have to use these guys no matter how much you want to or not. And then you enter Jake Diekman, and again, any type of high-leverage situation with guys on, you're just asking for a death sentence. And I guess that's what Carlos Mendoza asked for today. He's like, you know what? We're down 4-2, bases low, no out lane in the ball game. But, you know, let's just give it to Jake Diekman, because I have the utmost confidence in him to get a quality out here or two, versus maybe even considered, I don't know, Reed Garrett or someone else. But know what? Let's go with Jake Diekman. He's going to help lessen the damage here. Said absolutely nobody. Boneheaded managing. I don't care that the bullpen is as depleted as it is. There's nothing to justify putting Jake Diekman in that spot. It was horrendous. Set him up for failure, in which Jake Diekman has been a failure. In the case of Luis Severino, again, absolutely horrendous all-around showing here, folks. Let's talk about it, but I am looking forward to talking about Brandon Sproat, because that's at least a positive, everybody. But in the meantime, continue to smash that like and subscribe button. Thank you all so much, everybody. Help us get to 100 likes for our first short-term goal here on YouTube. Let me make sure that we're live both here on YouTube and on Twitter. I do believe that we are. And to my Twitter viewers, hit that like, that follow button, that retweet button, as always. But no, as always, I will only be interacting with our live viewers here on YouTube. Okay, guys, let's break down this godforsaken ball game, and then let's get into where do we go from here on the pitching end for this Mets team, because holy shit, was this a bad game. I mean, seriously, I'm sweating bullets for you guys right now because I don't have air conditioning in this garage turned beautiful setup that we have here where I'm currently at. Regardless, let's break down the ball game, everybody. Okay, final update for you all. Final thing I'll say. I'm sorry for the rambling, as I always do. Shintaro Fujinami, if there's one positive today, that isn't Brandon Sproat related, that isn't other prospect related. It's Shintaro Fujinami. Fuji, as we know, wild thing of the bullpen, Japanese arm that the Mets signed this past offseason to a $3+ million deal, ramping up, of course, in his rehab, worked another masterful outing there for the Double-A Rumble Ponies today. Entered the game that we saw there with the bases loaded and no out. And Shintaro Fujinami did what Jake Diekman wishes he could do, even in Double-A, and that's get out of that jam unscathed for the previous pitcher. And that is exactly what Shintaro Fujinami did today for the Rumble Ponies. He struck out all 3 batters he faced. He struck out the side. He left the bases loaded stranded, folks. So again, a guy that we know when it comes to control, he's all over the place, but when it comes to pure stuff, one of the more electrifying arms that we see in all Major League Baseball. Shintaro Fujinami continues to look great in his rehab, and I promise you will be called up by the Mets at some point, even if it isn't until post All-Star break when he's fully ramped up through rehab, similar to Bryce Montez Dioka in a way. Rest assured, these are arms that will impact this Mets bullpen, whether it's for the better with this guy having a ceiling as good of a setup man for Edwin Diaz and being utilized in the closer role at times, or him being walking everyone and their mother once again and cut before the season's end. Either way, we will find out those results in the coming weeks as Shintaro Fujinami, again, I promise you, will be in this bullpen sooner than later. Take off that hat? I will not take off the hat because I'm a happy dad, so get over it, you schmuck. And now let's break down the ball game, shall we? I actually didn't mean to put on my Mets hat. I had this one on all day as I've been out of town. It's 3 levels up from where I'm currently at. I'm sweating bullets. I'm like, I'm not going to go out of my way to grab it right now. We're rocking the happy dad as I have been for the past 2+ weeks. That's the one positive in my life outside of this godforsaken Mets game too, seriously. But all right, guys, the Mets give up 7 bombs today. How do they do it? They do it as follows. Mind you, this is the 5th time in Mets history they have given up 7 home runs in one singular ball game. And this tied again the Pittsburgh Pirates record that they had in their own right. Again, 7 home runs in one singular game. I know Skenes is a stud. I did not expect the Mets to win this game outright, but I didn't expect them to get blown out like this either. Okay, it starts here in the first. That's funny, A in the chat. Hey, okay, Lindor flies out. We saw he just missed a home run, ripped a breaking pitch beautifully by Paul Skenes, and just falls short on the warning track. Lindor was this close to a leadoff bomb to kick off this game in Pittsburgh. And man, oh man, that would have made quite the difference looking back, but it is what it is now. We get to the top of the second here because the Mets don't do anything after that, and Severino has a clean first inning of work. With 2 outs, then we see, pardon me, everybody. We see then, I can't even talk right now. I apologize. We see O'Neill get on with a single. That's all she wrote, though. And the top of the second, that was in the bottom of the first, I meant to say. The top of the second, we have Pete Alonso rips a single off of Paul Skenes, 96 heat that he turns on. DJ with a walk. So DJ Stewart again, who's kicked off this game, batting 5th today. Yes, I'm as surprised as you are. And yes, it was not justified. Mark Vientos should have been starting today. I thought that was beyond foolish by Mendoza to not have this. What? More lefties in the lap to face Skenes as if they're going to do anything against Paul. Jeff McNeil, that's a good argument because Jeff proved us all wrong today. DJ Stewart, though, just does what he does. And he's like Daniel Vogelbach when he's not swinging the bat, which is fairly often. He is getting on base with walks there. And then Alvarez strikes out thereafter. Alvy would not have a great day today, mainly because he gets drilled later in this ball game. Then we see Jose Iglesias, oh my God, double play, and Zieni. In the bottom of the second, we see Gonzalez get on with a hit by pitch from Severino. That's all she wrote. We then get to the top of the third here. Jeff McNeil somehow turns on one. 99 heat right down the pipe. I shouldn't even say it's down the pipe. It was is up in the zone, a little up and away. So the fact that McNeil pulled this as good as he did was jaw-dropping. It had everyone just like, that actually happened. Jeff McNeil just won Jeff McBomb against the new face of Major League Baseball, the new phenom, and Paul Skenes. Yes, that happened. McNeil makes it a 1-0 ball game. Lindor would reach on a throwing error thereafter. Nimmo with a walk, 2 on, less than 2, but JD Martinez grounds into a double play to end the inning. Thank you so much for the donation, Pat. Pat says the Grimace run has run its course. Bring on the Hamburglar. It's okay. Time to bring the hamburger to Citi Field. Who says no, baby? Who says no? Appreciate the donation. Thank you so much for that, Pat. Greatly appreciate you. No less, the Mets are up 1-0 here as we then get to the bottom of the third where we see Michael A. Taylor, a guy that the Mets were pursuing plenty this past offseason before ultimately passing on him and going with the likes of Bader and Tyrone Taylor. Taylor rips a single. We see Palacio with a double play ball, thankfully, turned beautifully by Jose Iglesias. Reynolds with with himself a bloop single. Of course, Mr. Brian Reynolds killed the Mets today. I'm going to show you guys how I have him on my Sorare MLB team. So there's there's one good thing about having him on my fantasy team, it was that today. But outside of that, I feel ashamed. I really do. I honestly didn't even put 2 and 2 together when I put Skenes in my lineup on who he's facing this weekend. So it really sucks. I've seen great point production with my fantasy team, but that's because they absolutely torched the Mets today. Highlighted, headline by, yes, Bryan Reynolds. But as we continue to break down this ballgame, everybody, we would see the bloop by Reynolds there. Then we see Nimmo make a fantastic barrel catch in left field diving play to end the inning. In the top of the fourth, Pete Alonso gets on with an opposite field double. Alonso with back-to-back quality at-bats against the young flamethrower right-hander in Skenes. Alvarez then gets on with a hit-by-pitch. Again, we're talking straight heat, straight to the elbow. Alvarez would stay in the ballgame, but that did not look pretty, and I was full-on ready to do a flight straight to Pittsburgh and donate both my elbows, even if you have to combine them into one, because I'll probably be the size of Alvy's because how freaking big he is. I will do whatever it takes to make sure Francisco El Tro Alvarez stays healthy. Thankfully, again, he would be fine. He's just going to have a welt there tomorrow, I'm sure, as the swelling continues. Jose with an RBI fielder's choice as he rips one opposite field in the infield. They turn it not in time enough. Iglesias is safe at first. The Mets are now up 2-0 against Paul Skenes and the Pirates. Surely things will go terrible from here. Little did we know. From here, we see Rowdy Tellez, and then 1 out later, another home run, this time by Sawinski. These guys ripped 2 bombs against Luis Severino with these in the bottom of the fourth, and this ball game is tied. And as soon as Paul Skenes looks at the scoreboard and sees that he has an even slate of a game, he locks in. In the bottom of the fifth, then, Taylor with the single, Palacio with the walk, runners advance on a Sevy horrendous throwing error to second base. He must have looked at the ump there because I don't know how otherwise he made that type of throw as bad as he did. Alvarez then throws out Taylor at third base, gets him sleeping. Great throw there, and that would be huge at least in the interim because the next at bat is Bryan Reynolds, and Bryan Reynolds rips a 2-run home run, his first of 2 bombs on the night that we see. Reynolds makes it a 4-2 Pirates lead, but would have been 5-2 if it wasn't for Alvarez and that great pickoff that we saw there at third base. Great snag there, great tag by Iglesias, as you guys and gals see in the highlights right there. But here we are. It's a 2-0 deficit. Not feeling great about the game at this point, but you're like, okay, the Mets are still within striking distance, and they have been striking late plenty this season. So it's not out of the realm of possibility, surely, right? They're in this ball game. Again, that's what we were thinking for, what, a couple seconds? Because then we see not long after, we see Bryan Reynolds make it 4-2. Paul Skenes then works a 1-2-3 inning in the sixth, in which he retired 8 batters in a row at that point. Severino works his first 1-2-3 inning of the day that we see there in the bottom of the sixth himself. And then the seventh, this is where the game officially goes to die. Skenes escapes a 1-out jam. He strikes out Harrison Bader beautifully to end the top of the inning. And then the bottom of the seventh, after that big stretch by the Pirates, they see a double from Grandal because it gets over the head of Harrison Bader. Piss poor defensive alignment. Should have been back farther on the ball. I get why Bader probably wasn't because you're not expecting Grandal to go deep or go gap to gap all that much at this point in his career. No less, it goes over his head. A runner is in scoring position, and all hell breaks loose from here. After that double that we would see by Grandal, we would then see bases loaded, no out. Severino's pulled from the ball game, and Jake Diekman is entered thanks to Carlos Mendoza. Again, this bullpen has been horrendous. They're depleted, I know. It's not like you have great options, but I can make an argument for basically everyone else not named Ty Adcock and this bullpen, even with them being taxed, even with them being a little tired, versus Jake Diekman. As simple as that, because Jake Diekman gives up a grand slam to Bryan Reynolds to make it an 8-2 ball game. And then after that, the offense continues there. We would then see a single by Cruz, Rowdy with a walk, and then Ty Adcock comes in the ball game. He ends that inning. And then as we, of course, get to the bottom of the eighth, because the Mets don't do anything on the offensive end, Grandal then rips a home run. All he's missing is a triple and a single for the cycle today for the veteran catcher. Another home run after that makes it 10-2. I don't even remember a Pirate hit it, nor do I really give a flying you-know-what after this outcome of this ball game. Rowdy then rips a grand slam off of Adcock to make it 14-2. That would be your final. Just horrendous job. We know this ball game is bad when Luis Torrens comes in to pitch the final out or so of the ball game. That is when you know you have really fallen big time, and the Mets again fall flat on their face, flat on their ass by a final score of 14-2. Everybody on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm really curious for my live viewers here on YouTube, for my replay viewers in the comments down below, and for my live viewers here on Twitter as well. All chime in. I want to hear your thoughts on this. On a scale of 1 to 10, how concerned are you currently with the Mets, where they are currently at, dropping 5 of their past 7 games now, for the past 5 games in which they had the lead. 2 of those 5 games, they had a 5-run lead or more and blew it. And now the Mets are a couple games below 500. Again, it's a marathon, not a sprint when it comes to the wild card. We know that. So the last thing that I'm personally stressing is that aspect of this, as I am more focused on just the Mets getting back into their winning ways and how their bullpen continues to be exposed to the point where there's nothing to justify this whatsoever. I know that David Stearns, his hands have been tied quite a bit here, but we have also been saying for a number of days now, even with internal options that you may have in Shintaro Fujinami, in Bryce Montes Dioka, among others, even Eric Orsi to a degree, give these guys a call. Josh Walker, where are you? Literally, I would take your southpaw of an arm any and every day of the week over what we have here and Jake Diekman. I would even take Joey Fuego, Joey Lucchesi, who was masterful in his outing, and yet another strong start there for AAA Syracuse. Who wouldn't take Joey Fuego right now in this bullpen? As a 1 or 2 inning guy, that would be perfect for him in my opinion, given his arsenal and given that he isn't going to do well projecting well at the MLB level because of his lack of depth and said arsenal. Again, it's the same way that we've been going about Jose Buto now in the bullpen. We should do this with other starters that we know are not going to be anything more than innings eaters in this Mets organization. Joey Lucchesi, we all know Joey Fuego will be nothing more than an innings eater. Why not give him an opportunity here and part ways with a schmuck that has helped single-handedly help lose you ball games the way Jay Diekman has plenty this season? And then to add insult to injury, Edwin Diaz, as much as I love Edwin, as much as I truly believe the MLB are the absolute schmucks that they are for the suspension, I do not believe Edwin was at all doing anything nefarious because nothing would suggest that whatsoever. And for anyone thinking, oh, how did he go from, really looking bad before his injury, then looking good? I don't know. How did Edwin Diaz get out of his horrendous rut from 2019 and then blossoming into what he became that we saw in 2022? And then, of course, spurts of greatness that we even saw in 2021. Just couldn't pitch him on back-to-back days and in non-save situations, right? Things changed throughout the course of the season. When you have a shoulder impingement, it was more of a confidence thing with Diaz. That's why he was put on the IL. He was fine. Once he got his confidence right, we were seeing the Edwin of old again quite a bit. To suggest he's using sticky stuff was ridiculous, but regardless on if it was justified or not, this is the facts. Edwin Diaz's suspension has hurt the Mets in more ways than one. And Edwin Diaz, again, whether we like it or not, whether it's justified or not, has single-handedly helped hurt the Mets a lot this season. It's been great to see Edwin and the heroics that he has had, but we should also account for the times in which Edwin has hurt the Mets. And I'm not going to blame him nearly as much here for the blown saves leading up until his IL stint. Again, this is Edwin's first year in over a year coming back from a very serious tear that we saw in his knee. Not an easy thing to bounce back from whatsoever. So I expected rust. I expected ups and downs. But a 10-game span where you lose Edwin Diaz, regardless of who is at fault, is killing the Mets here every single day. They have done very little to help round things out with their bullpen being down a man. They've tried their assumed best, but their assumed best is far from the best that they could be doing. So my response here to Carlos Mendoza, David Stearns, everyone involved here, changes need to be had yesterday. We all know that. Edwin Diaz returns tomorrow, great. We're going to have a normal-sized bullpen then. Okay, if Jake Diekman pitches in a game again this series, I'm going to come out here with an effing pitchfork and tell you how much of an absolute joke this bullpen configuration continues to be. I can give plenty benefit of the doubt here to David Stearns at times, of course, with the ups and downs, with the injuries, of course, to Sean Reed-Foley, which I think we are not talking about nearly enough. I knew as soon as SRF went down, that would be a killer because he has been a fantastic innings eater for the Mets this season. As soon as we saw other injuries, even Drew Smith, of course, being out for the year, while he is definitely liable there, not a reliable guy, but a liable guy that we see in high leverage situations, still an arm that the Mets have been utilizing. Now he's out for the year as well. Then you add in the Edwin Diaz suspension. It was just a domino effect of 3 significant bullpen impacts in a multiple day span, and the Mets simply have not been able to recover whatsoever since then. Let's see, Wardy, don't you want to hear if you spoke highly on Dumpster Dave and hiring? Here's the thing, I do still feel highly of David Stearns because I'm not the reactionary fan that views a losing 5 a past 7 game stretch as an end-all be-all in evaluating a present baseball operations and a manager. Am I happy with Carlos Mendoza and all of his decisions this past week of baseball? No, I'm not. Is he at fault for everything? No, he isn't. Is David Stearns at fault for everything? No, he's not. And if it isn't for David Stearns, the Mets don't even get on any run that they've had this year because David Stearns is the reason why JD Martinez is a New York Met. He's the reason why Harrison Bader is a New York Met. He's the reason that up until today, Luis Severino, Sean Manaea have been productive starters in this Mets rotation. There's a reason why we have seen, again, brilliant in-house call-ups that we would have never seen under Billy Epler and Daniel Nunez, to name a few there, Reed Garrett among others. Yes, all of them haven't panned out, but David Stearns has had a cutthroat mentality. Luis Torrens on $100,000 has been impactful. My point is that we can nitpick a lot of things, but to nitpick David Stearns, I think the only gripe you could truly give him right now is that we should be having more bullpen reinforcements and we should be seeking them externally. I know it's not easy with the trade deadline not here yet, still weeks away, but for a Mets team that, again, is still trying to compete here, there are arms out there that are not going to cost you king's ransom to go out and seek. I'm sure Stearns has been doing calls, but to no avail right now, and this Mets bullpen needs help on the pitching end and fast. On the offensive end, we all know they're going to fluctuate. We all know they're going to have their ups and downs. Let's not forget Starling Marte being out certainly hurts in that regard too, because when he has been healthy, he has been hitting quite well this season, has been a nice lethal weapon, an otherwise dominant offense for the Mets the past month and a half. Now they, of course, have been on a dry spell the past couple of days here in this road trip, and they look to get back to their winning ways as soon as tomorrow. But before we get there, we got to continue to talk about how horrendous this Mets team has been as a collective group their past 7 games. To drop these games up the leads that they have is inexcusable, especially those 2 5-run lead games. Those are the most inexcusable. Those are the gut punches, and those are the ones I look at the most to say, hey, that's why we're below 500 right now. Go down with the Stearns ship. Yes, absolutely. You can call me, 100%. When David Stearns is still the Mets president of baseball operations for a number of years and has success, I will be here and you'll be like, wow, I never saw that coming. Again, because you weren't paying attention, and that's fine. What we are talking about today is not the David Stearns impact of things. What we're talking about is this implosion by the Mets here. And I want to go back in here for a second, folks. We're going to get on to the pitching now. We're going to get it to the offense. We'll talk a little bit on the offense briefly. From there, we'll transition into pitching, talk about our amazing sponsors, and then we'll get into Brandon Sproat and how great he was for Mets AA beating him yesterday here in a second. How come we don't have a concert today? I don't know, Priest. Why don't you answer that one for me? Mets, I think, are now 2-5 since the Jose Iglesias concert. But I want to go back up here in the chat because I asked you guys, what is your concern level on a scale of 1 to 10 after dropping 5 of their past 7 games? Steve is at 8, David's at 11, Yeet is at 10, Ben is at 8.5, Scott is at 6, Michael's at 10, D is at 9, We Don't Believe Yol is at 10, Ron is at 10 as well, bunch of 9s, Dave is at 100, a great member, great friend, he's not happy right now. 10, let's see this, 6, 10, a lot of this, some 7s, okay, so higher above 5, 9 out of 10 for most of you guys, and I understand that. Don't worry, guys, my Braves are playing pretty bad right now. It doesn't matter. Truthfully, to Braves fans out there watching this, no offense, but like, they're the last thing we're thinking about right now. Trust me. But us Mets fans are far more concerned on just playing good, consistent baseball than we are in catching the Braves in the division. You know, all we care about for most is actually just making playoffs. If that's even a thing that is a possibility for this Mets team. It absolutely is. When you drop 5 or 7 games, and now the Mets again, and this was a graphic that we saw made. What do you give Trevor? No, see, this is the thing. The Trevor Bauer nonsense is the most hilarious part. It's brought up every single day. It's brought up every single year the past couple years. To anyone that thinks that there's any realm of possibility the Mets ever sign Trevor Bauer before he's no longer a player at any pro level, I have a bridge to sell you. That bridge burned back 3+ years ago when he played the Mets the way he did and went to the Dodgers and how that entire ordeal happened. Since then, the Mets have actually been one of the most proactive teams in Major League Baseball on trying to make sure that they avoid people with controversy the way that Trevor Bauer certainly has with them. Whether it's justified or not, in your humble opinion, you guys can keep them to yourselves. It doesn't matter to me at all. All I'm telling you that is the Trevor Bauer talk you can continue to say, but it's going to be continuing to talk to a wall because it's not going to get anywhere. This has nothing to do with my personal opinion on Trevor Bauer. This is common sense. And the fact that we're talking about him here in the month of July is hilarious because people just don't seem to understand the unfortunate reality for his sake and his career right now. It will not be with the Mets. Maybe Major League Baseball again, but I promise you, I can literally tell you from people I know well within the organization, there is not a chance in hell Trevor Bauer will be a New York Metropolitan. And that's what I have to say about that. Now, before we get on to a little bit on the numbers here, folks, I did just want to see what else you guys got for me in the chat. Let's see. Bring up Bryce Montes, Diekman, and Fujinami. The Mets will consider both those options, but neither of them are ready. They're still working up in their rehab to this point, folks. And again, thank you all so much, everyone that's been in here. We're almost at 100 likes. Thank you all so much for that. Continue to smash those buttons. Greatly appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts here as the Mets again falter big time by a final score of 14-2, folks. But before we get into a bit on the numbers, before we get into a little bit more on what is going on again with the Mets and why they faltered as much as they did today, folks, let's take a quick word to hear from our amazing sponsor on the channel and how you guys can get involved today. And again, I just hope you've been tailing my picks lately. I did not bet on the Mets today, and it's reasons because of Paul Skenes among others, but make sure to check out our great friends for all your sports betting needs at Yes Bet US. Okay, is that just not going to work? Give me 1 second, folks.
BetUS, America's favorite sportsbook and casino. Live betting and racebook. We're celebrating 30 years with a historic offer. A 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits. Plus 10% gambler's insurance. Get started today. BetUS, where the game begins.
As always, everybody, shout out BetUS, who has you covered with all your sports betting needs. And as you guys and gals can see here, to get involved on the betting end, we're going to show you guys some picks for tomorrow's slate of baseball games, folks. Again, this week we have went 3-1 on our picks thus far, all parlay related. The one that we didn't hit on was a couple days ago. We hit on our pass again 2 of 3 in baseball, and we hit on UFC 303 a weekend or so ago now. And as we take a look at tomorrow's games, I'm not touching the Mets whatsoever the way they're playing, nor am I touching the Pirates, because I have no clue what to expect from Falter and Peterson tomorrow. Cardinals, Nationals, which will be a tight matchup, I'm sure. Phillies, Braves, which of course is a heated rivalry right now. That's like a coin flip. You can take your pick. Phillies, of course, are banged up, but so are the Braves to a degree, obviously. Diamondbacks, Padres, that's going to be a heated series too. I like that one a lot. I really do. I even like the Diamondbacks quite a bit here at the spread at +1.5 to make sure that they don't lose by more than a run. So I'm going to do exactly that. The same way, we're going to go double underdog here, actually. We're going to take both the Red Sox and the Diamondbacks spread tomorrow. Yanks have been playing like absolute garbage right now. It's always a heated battle between one of, if not the biggest rivalry in all Major League Baseball, Boston and New York. This 2-leg parlay, folks, that I'm going to show you is going to be $10. That is going to win you a total of, drum roll please, $16.11. So if you guys, again, want to get involved and tail my picks here for our nightly betting picks for all your sports betting needs, check out our great friends at BetUS by clicking the link in the description down below today to get a 125% bonus on not your first, not your second, but your first 3 deposits. We just gave away a Mets Brandon Nimmo jersey a couple weeks ago to one lucky winner, all just for signing up to BetUS and sending me a screenshot of proof to my email, which is in the description of said show. So if you guys go out your way to do that too, rest assured you guys will have an upper hand for the next time we do giveaways here on the channel relating to both the Mets and here at BetUS. But to hop back into breaking down this ballgame, folks, let's get into the pitching just a little bit more here, okay? Because we saw Luis Severino falter as much as he did today, heavily reliant on the fastball that we saw. Ridiculous fastball usage, as a matter of fact. I'm actually going to pull up right now just how serious was it by Severino today, because he, again, it felt like all he was throwing was heater, 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 heater. He had no control. He had no confidence as well. And while he did get some swing and miss in this ball game, it just was not a pretty showing by Mr. Luis Severino whatsoever. And as we look at the player breakdown here, he was using that sinker a lot. Yep, 55% of the time. 16% of the time was a 4-seam, 10% of the time was a sweeper, 10% slider, and 9% was the changeup that we saw there by Luis Severino. His year average on his velocity was down on all pitches today except for the changeup, so universally he was down quite a bit there. And again, he threw the fastball, he threw the sinker quite often today, and the swing and miss just wasn't there. The sinker, 14% whiff rate, 4-seam fastball had 0 whiffs, folks. So when you're throwing it at least 16% of the time, the way that Sevy was, you're going to have a problem. And then the sinker, again, I know you're looking for that sinker to induce more ground balls than anything else, so I understand that. And the sweeper slider, he, of course, had a 40% whiff rate there on the sweeper. On the slider, he had a 100% whiff rate, albeit there was only 1 swing and 1 whiff, so it's not like it was a huge sample size there. But Luis Severino, again, with just 3 Ks, we saw 2 walks, 7 earned runs because of the grand slam given up by Diekman. He's at a 3.83 ERA on the season. If I have to give Severino a grade out of a start today, it's really hard to not give him, anything. I have to give him nothing higher than a 3 out of 10. The 3 is pretty much just for the length, honestly. 3.5 tops. And again, what would have happened if Severino stayed in this ball game, bases low, no out later in this one over Diekman? We're never going to know now. Cue the Kanye line, of course. I guess we'll never know. But in the case of Luis Severino and just how he looked out there today, he looked far from sharp. So that's why I'm giving him a 3 out of 10. Definitely curious where you guys have Luis Severino in an outing like this. Let me know in the chat, as always, everybody. Yeah, Chiefs, we got absolutely pooped today, for sure. Corona in the chat says, bottom line, Mendoza has no idea how to run a bullpen. Here's the thing. Carlos Mendoza has not been great with the bullpen. We are all aware of that. What is also true is that this Mets bullpen has been absolutely taxed, and there have been times where his hands have been tied. For those instances, I feel for Carlos Mendoza. Do I feel for Carlos Mendoza today to sign and bring in Diekman in the 7th inning that we saw bases loaded, no outs? No, I don't feel for him there. The same way that I honestly don't feel for allowing Adrian Hauser to pitch anything remotely close to Jesse Winker yesterday instead of either trying to pitch around him, which, then Hauser did a horrendous job of, because he freaking on a curveball, beautifully placed a little down and in there in the zone for Winker to rip his 6th home run of his career against just Adrian Hauser, mind you. Yes, those bullpen decisions have not been fun. I've not been happy about them. I personally didn't gripe all that much a couple games ago when he pulled Adam Ottavino after just 3 outs and then brought in Diekman, and then Diekman did Diekman things. He was god-awful, and that's why we were ranting 48 hours ago why Jake Diekman should not be in this Mets bullpen. However, Adam Ottavino is so Jekyll and Hyde going beyond 3 outs that I don't blame him all that much in that situation. But in the others, I see what you're saying. All I know is that when it comes to this Mets bullpen, they're so depleted right now that we can sit here and nitpick Mendoza all we want. We can nitpick Stearns to a degree, but this falls on, again, just the unfortunate reality of the roster construction at the moment with their current injuries and the suspension. Thankfully, Edwin Diaz makes his long-awaited return to this Mets bullpen tomorrow, which will be massive. He might even pitch for a save, God willing, if the Mets are in a save situation. I know it's probably, a tall task for this team, looking how they've been looking the past, 5, out of the past 7 games. No less, everybody. Stop defending him. No, I'm going to, regardless on what you guys say. That's another thing. I can rant all I want. I can be hot-headed, but it suggests that Carlos Mendoza has been at complete fault for everything this season. Again, is another very silly notion. I'd make the great argument that Carlos Mendoza has helped in many ways for the Mets and really rallying around each other and having a good player-first mentality in that clubhouse. Is he perfect? No, but I expected this. I expected Carlos Mendoza to have a lot of ups and downs as a manager, and if you didn't for a first-time manager, then I got a bridge to sell you too, because clearly you're as gullible as one can be to think otherwise. I don't know how you could think otherwise, truthfully. Again, Mendoza isn't going anywhere. He's going to have moments where you love him this year. He's going to have moments even like today where maybe you hated him. It isn't going to change anything. Let's see here. Terens was our best pitcher. Yes, he was our best pitcher. Easy outs there that we saw for Luis Terens, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately, not in the case of Terens getting the outs, but unfortunately in the sense of the Mets getting no proper pitching performance from anyone else in the organization that pitched today. On the hitting end, everybody, again, there wasn't a lot to see. Let's get into this. Let's break it down. Let's get into the following, folks. Yeah, and that's what I mean, Gavin. That's what I like to reiterate. I know a lot of fans can definitely get frustrated with my personal opinions at times. We all have our own opinions. They vary. Of course, a lot of you guys agree or disagree with what I have to say. But when I talk about the likes of Trevor Bauer, when I talk about certain things with Mendoza, I say these things in confidence because it's common sense. We can sit here and rant all we want about, oh, okay, I want Mendoza out of here, but it isn't going to happen. You can sit here and say, oh, I think David Stearns is a schmuck. I don't like his decision-making. Okay, he isn't going anywhere this year, nor are they going anywhere next year. Solid chance they probably aren't anywhere 2 years from now, unless the Mets do absolutely nothing over the next calendar year. Then that's a decision where I'm sure Steve Cohen will have his hands tied on what to do again. But that's what I mean when I reiterate these things. It might not be what you want to hear, but it's the truth. And that's what it is. But to talk on the offensive end, everybody, let me just briefly run down, again, the shit show of an outing by the Mets. Not much to show, just like yesterday. Again, folks, just a whole lot of nothing for the most part. But on the offensive end, we got Lindor now with a 244 average, 751 OPS. He went 0 for. Nimmo 0 for 243 with an 802. JDM 0 for 272 with an 836. Alonso actually was one of the one bright spots on the offense today. Fitting that the one time Alonso is a bright spot on the offensive end, no one else shows up for him. 245 average, 802 OPS. Gamble 0 for 1, 143, 536. DJ Stewart 0 for 3 with a walk, 176, 652. Alvarez 1 for 3 that we saw there, 292, 850. Jose Iglesias 1 for 4, 339, 855. Jeff McNeil 1 for 3 with the home run, 216, 585. Harrison Bader 0 for 3, 267, 716. That is the New York Metropolitans' unfortunate offensive outing where they had no offense pretty much after the first couple innings of said matchup. Gamble does suck, 100%. Yeah, we know that. Good vibes, everybody. Let's see. Good vibes, everybody. We're all still going to watch. I know a lot of you guys are going to watch for sure. Let's see, everybody. Let me scroll up here in the chat for 1 second. They hate that Oh My God song that haven't won anything since that concert. Yeah, I know that feels cursed to Mets fans. And that's one of those things where I don't blame you guys either. Everyone even references going back to Edwin Diaz and when we had Narco performed live by Timmy Trumpet in 2022. The Mets have had a losing record since then. Albeit, is he the reason? No. But us Mets fans, the same way we cleaned on to Grimace the past month plus that we have, is the same way that we're going to now clean on to Jose Iglesias performing at Citi Field as bad juju. So I don't know if we need to start burning sage at Citi Field or, at PNC Park tomorrow or whatever. All I know is that things need to change and fast for this Mets team, or obviously in a little bit of a rut right now and are getting gut punch after gut punch. They get reinforcements back in Diaz tomorrow, but they most certainly need a lot more help than just Edwin returning to this bullpen. We need more help. We definitely need external arms to be acquired. Again, not for a King's ransom. I have no interest in the Mets going out of their way to acquire relievers that are going to give up key prospects. I just want them to go out and get arms that are capable, that can eat innings right now, but can do it at a quality rate. If we can find them in-house the way that we have to a degree with Reed Garrett and Danilo Nunez, I'm unbelievably confident that we can do that externally. It's just a matter of, actually doing that. James, thank you so much for upgrading your membership, my friend. Happy to have you in here. Greatly appreciate that. Really does mean a lot, folks. And again, shout out to you, James, as always. But now, folks, let's talk about a positive. If there's some things I can leave you on the positive note with, let's get into the prospect end, as there are plenty of positives on the prospect end before we wrap up the show, everybody. And again, thank you all so much for taking the time as you guys continue to smash that like and subscribe on as the amazing Mets fans that each and every one of you always are. Give me 1 second. I want to make sure that we have everything pulled up here. Continue to let me know your thoughts, your frustration levels, especially as the Mets falter embarrassingly by a final score here today of 14-2. I mean, that's another thing, too. To get embarrassed the way the Mets did today to an otherwise a god-awful offense that we've seen this season, all the more reason to be as frustrated, to be ranted, to be venting, to be hot-headed the way that we certainly are. There's nothing to justify. Just a ridiculous outing. Absolutely ridiculous by the Mets as a whole today. All right, guys, let's get into the key pitching. Let's get into the key prospect reports. All the key standouts that we saw yesterday from Mets prospects, and then we will break down Brandon Sproat and his individual game in particular. I'm even going to show you guys Brandon Sproat highlights that I know my man Isaac did a great job of cutting up yesterday, so we're going to go to his Twitter and look at that in a minute. But first, folks, yesterday that we saw in AAA, Rylan Bannon went 2 for 5 with a home run and a double. Luke Ritter, who I know a lot of Mets fans would like to see considered in the infield right now over some other options that they currently have. 2 for 5 with a home run and a triple. Yolmer Sanchez, 2 for 3 with a home run and 4 RBIs. Joey Lucchesi, as I mentioned earlier, he went 7 strong innings of 1 earned run ball and 5 strikeouts. At the AA level, this is where we're going to get in with Brandon Sproat. 6.2 innings of 2 earned run ball, but 9 strikeouts, touching 100 on the gun. Yes, we have already entered that category with Brandon Sproat, where we're talking about him, and similar like to Kristen Scott, as not only the face of this Mets rotation for the future going forward, but looking at ace caliber potential here in Brandon Sproat. I know we're not just throwing out these labels for the sake of throwing them out. We're throwing them out because there's justified reasons behind that kind of hype. Not to put pressure on his shoulders, just the reality. Brandon Sproat is that mofo. We're going to get into that in a second. Ryan Clifford, who I absolutely love, one of my favorite Mets minor leaguers personally. He is our Kyle Schwarber, if you will. I love to call him that because he hits for low average and hits tanks and is around a 900 OPS. And Ryan Clifford yesterday had one of his best games of the season for the Rumble Ponies, 4 for 5 with a home run. Outside that, we really didn't see anything else in the prospect end. Jeremy Rodriguez went 2 for 5 yesterday. There we saw in the FCL League, and that was great. But now let's get into a bit here on what stood out on Brandon Sproat in particular, folks. So let me make sure I have this all pulled up for you. Just give me 1 second. We're actually going to do this. Let's go. I'm going to read the report, and then I'm going to show you guys his highlights, and that'll be a lot of fun. So give me 1 second. All right, guys. As we talk now about Brandon Sproat, let's get into him. Why has he stood out so much this season? And what stood out so much about him that we saw yesterday? Well, it is as follows, everybody. Let's break it down. Brandon Sproat yesterday had 6.2 innings of 3 hit, 2 earned run ball, 2 walks, 9 strikeouts for a 2.05 ERA and a 1.75 overall ERA that we've been seeing in the Rumble Ponies this season. 93 pitches, 65 strikes, and a 70% strike rate. Ridiculous. Absolutely disgusting stuff. Painting, dotting those corners is Brandon Sproat. And there's a lot of information about a relay, so listen up. His arsenal, no percentage data. Velos are based off of track record. Forcing fastball sitting between 94 to 98. Topped out at 101.5. Yes, Brandon Sproat is almost at the 102 level for the hardest fastball that we have documented now in his pro career. Insane stuff. Slider sitting 86 to 90. Changeup 87 to 89. Curveball 78 to 81. And the sweeper velo is unofficial there. It fluctuates quite a bit. And make sure to check out my man Isaac Groffman, who comes at me with these reports every night at ISAACGROFFMAN for all your Mets pitching threads and pitching knowledge needs. He does a fantastic job in breaking down all the little details about Mets farm and current pitchers on the roster. Newly minted top 100 prospect Brandon Sproat had himself another dominant start that we saw. 15 whiffs, 9 of which were on the fastball, 3 of which came from an established changeup, which is very important, as my good friend James Schiano broke down in a post-game show the other day here. The fact that he has as established of a changeup as he has as a weapon in his arsenal, as a nice strikeout pitch too, is huge when called upon. And 3 with the slider we saw too. His fastball topped out at 100 yesterday, and his low release angle and great extension looked fantastic and made it oh so disastrously for those hitters. It made it even look faster than what it initially was. His fastball topped out there at 100, as we mentioned. And something very interesting about Brandon Sproat is that he's sitting there that we see 98 to 100 on his heater this season in the first inning, but was sitting 96 to 98 the rest of the game. This is something we saw a guy like Jacob deGrom do plenty, first coming out firing, and then, taking a little bit of a step back, working his off-speed pitches, but then when he needs to get that heater in his back pocket to get 98, 99, 100 before the end of the ball game, he can certainly do that. He's just not overworking himself, nor should he, because this is going to help keep a guy like Brandon Sproat, who's a flamethrower, healthy. I personally, on the sake of how we think about Brandon Sproat, Isaac had to say the following. He thinks that Sproat's changeup is one of the most underrated pitches in the minor leagues right now, as he got 3 lifts on it this past night. And again, it looked fantastic in doing so. We also see with Sproat that he features a slider cutter hybrid or a slaughter pause type pitch that has tight movement and high velocity. The slaughter, which is an advanced changeup and a high fastball, gives him 3 legit weapons against left-handed hitting. He's also working on a sweeper as a weapon against right-handed pitchers that we are seeing, especially down and away, Adam Ottavino-esque, if you will, but he did not throw many last night. We saw he also changes his speeds and with his curveball once in a while, so something to make note of too. It fluctuates quite a bit there on the velocity. It's fun to have such an electrifying pitcher of a prospect here in Brandon Sproat, and it's safe to say that he is going to take this rotation by storm. It's a matter of when, not if. Brandon Sproat, currently in AA, wouldn't be the most shocking thing in the world if he is called up before the season's end, because his stuff is so good. And what many prospect evaluators will tell you, what you see at the AA level, more often than not, is far more impressive than what you get at the AAA level. Because AA is where you're having top prospects really trying to come out and blossom, whereas AAA is where guys are trying to fine-tune their game to be MLB mainstays, or they cannot get over that hump. They stay as quad A players there that we see in AAA. So to see Brandon Sproat dominating key top hitting prospects of opposing teams there in AA is further proof as to why it will not be all that surprising if Sproat does impact the Mets before the season ends. Especially in the case of the Mets, say, for example, even if they are buyers, I do see it as a possibility, but say they go full sell and they trade Severino, they trade Quintana, they trade Manaea, they get rid of all those expendable pieces in the rotation, that would further warrant a Sproat call-up, especially if the Mets do free fall and sell at the deadline and just focus on 2025 instead of pushing for the wild card more in the second half of this season. If that happens, Sproat, I think there's a greater likelihood of him being called up. Either way, even if it doesn't happen until next season, it will not be long before we see Brandon Sproat having quite the impact for the Mets and this rotation. So again, if there's something positive that I could share with you today, folks, it is certainly that. Not a lot else great in Mets land right now, I got to be frank with you, but Brandon Sproat is certainly one of them, folks. And let's transition real quick now. Yes, we did give up 7 home runs, including 2 grand slams. Absolutely ridiculous today. Let's see what you guys have to say here. Matt Vierling, Ryan McMahon, Devers, no, I don't see the Mets acquiring any of them, if I'm being honest. Where are his highlights? Which highlights are we talking about, Jack? We do have some swing and miss there by Skenes, but if you're looking for anything crazy, you're not going to get that today. This is a Mets-related show and not a Pirates one, so we take the highlights more from Mets-related things than anything else. Talking about Sproat to the bullpen. Brandon Sproat to the bullpen. Does it make sense for the sake of having an electric arm in the pen and him being on a pitching innings limit? Yeah, it does. Does it actually make sense for him to get acclimated at the MLB level to get a taste that way? It does make sense too. My only reason why I could see Brandon Sproat in the pen not happening, like at all, is simply because the Mets want to make sure that he continues to stay stretched as a starter, and they view that more important than anything else. Sproat's arm is nasty enough to warrant him coming in this bullpen and being an electric reliever for the Mets this season. But something tells me the Mets and David Stearns are not going to want to do that this year. It's an interesting suggestion, and honestly something that I haven't pondered too much, but as it's now apparent to me, I see the pros to it. Obviously, immediate help. Sproat has stuff to be an electric setup man for Edwin Diaz too. He really does. Electric arm, we know that, and can provide you length in this bullpen. So from that standpoint, you think it makes sense to give him an opportunity there, get his feet wet at the MLB level too, where maybe, he's not facing the top hitters right away. Maybe you bring him in a relief role to face, the 7, 8, 9 in the order and kind of build from there. I get that idea, but I also get why the Mets could be very stubborn and say, hey, we only want Brandon Sproat called up, one, when we fully believe he's ready, and two, when we know he's going to be our every 4th or 5th day starter. That's where I think it makes most sense. So until David Stern says otherwise and says, hey, we're calling up Brandon Sproat, he's going to be a reliever, I don't think it's going to happen. Ton goes to AA, and then when Sproat goes to AAA, I would make the argument that there's a role where Brandon Sproat barely plays at AAA. Truthfully, I think there's a role where that doesn't even happen much because of how good he is, and I don't think he's going to need to prove much at the AAA level. Really don't. And it's similar to Paul Skenes, for example. Other than freaking service time manipulation, there aren't all that many reasons to justify doing such a thing, folks. But now let's hop back into this one, guys, as we're going to go here. Give me 1 second. Also, apologies if I had something running. Okay, now we don't. Everybody, check out my friend Isaac Rothman if you guys haven't already. Fantastic Mets fan, an awesome contributor for the channel. And here is Brandon Sproat's highlights from yesterday for you all to check out. Oh, never mind. Okay, so here we have Brandon Sproat's highlights, everybody. Let me see if they're going to run for you or not. Give me 1 second. Maybe they're not going to run. Hold on, everybody. Oh, very laggy. Very interesting. For whatever reason, they're just not showing fully the way that I thought that they'd be showing. I'm not sure exactly why that is, but it's not the end of the world. Either way, Brandon Sproat in a nutshell, just ridiculous swing and miss stuff. Was dotting those corners yesterday. It was working beautifully. We saw the slide piece too. I mean, he's really coming into his own. And to see Brandon Sproat now looking like, again, a dominant starter, it's a very exciting prospect on just how much of an impact he's going to have for the Mets. Maybe not right away, but certainly at some point, right? So Brandon Sproat, there's what you need to see about him. For whatever reason, those highlights just aren't running. Again, not sure exactly what happened there, everybody. But before we wrap up the live show, folks, let me do a double check to make sure that I didn't miss any key outings on the prospect end today that we saw in either Syracuse, among others, and then we will wrap up today's show. And again, thank you all so much for continuing to smash that like and subscribe button if you haven't already, folks, as we break down the latest in Mets land as they lose this one by a final score, a whopping score of, yes, 14-2. Just an FYI, everybody, we will possibly be live tomorrow as well, but not certain if we will be live here on the computer or if I'll be live on my phone or doing a pre-recorded video. So just fair warning, if I'm not live directly after the game tomorrow, that is probably the reason why, because I'm out of town. However, I'm going to do my best to try to make sure I cover it for you guys the same way will apply there that we're going to see early on Sunday and then early on Monday. But the Mets did win today for the Syracuse Mets via a final score of 4-2. And on the offensive end, Luke Ritter had another nice day, 2 for 3 that we saw there. That's all she wrote, though, on the offensive end. Nothing else notable. Tyler McGill gave up 2 earned runs in just 3.1 innings there that we saw in Syracuse today. His first outing back since being sent down, walked a whopping 5 batters and struck out 7. So Tyler McGill, who struggled with his command for the vast majority of his young career, continues to unfortunately do exactly that. I wish for Tyler's case he can get that command down and be effective. Danny Young, Eric Orzi, and Tyler J all had scoreless innings for the Syracuse Mets today. Josh Walker as well, 1.1 scoreless. I want Josh Walker called back up. If you're not going to bring up Lucchesi, bring up Walker. I can understand not wanting to consider Danny Young because he hasn't been good his past couple times out there. But Josh Walker, again, he is up and down. I know that, but between him or Mr. Joey Lucchesi, I wouldn't be opposed to either getting the call and just seeing what they have. Because, again, the bar is so low in this Mets bullpen to just get some outs here from guys that pitch from their left freaking hand and left arm. But, again, that's such a tall task for this Mets team right now since they've lost Brooks Raley to season-ending injury. And as we pivot now into the Rummel Ponies, they won today by a final score of 7-3. So let's take a look if anything stood out here for the Rummel Ponies. And on the offensive end, yes, of course, we see Matt Rudick have himself a big day. The San Diego native who's drafted 3 years ago by the Mets. Let's see what Rudick had in store today. He had a big day, 3 for 4 with 2 runs scored. On the offensive end, too, nothing else too notable. Truthfully, Ryan Clifford, 1 for 4 with a run scored. On the pitching end, Nolan McLean went 5 strong innings, our cowboy, if you will, because he bats and pitches and had himself a solid pitching night. One of his best starts that we've seen now in AA Binghamton. 5 innings of 8 hits, 2 run, 1 earned run ball, 2 walks, 5 strikeouts, a 5.45 ERA this year. And Shintaro Fujinami Fujinami again struck out the side and got Nolan McLean out of that bases loaded, no out jam that we saw in said ball game for the Rumble Ponies today. Great stuff by Shintaro as he continues to work back from injury and will have an impact on this Mets bullpen at some point this season. Hopefully sooner rather than later, because again, the bar's low. He's electric. He might be wild, but he's electric. We'll take whatever we can get, even if it is quite literally wild thing that you'll find for Major League. Cough, cough. Nope, we're not going to go with Charlie Sheen. We're going to enter Shintaro Fujinami. Now let's get into the Cyclones here. Let's take a look at their scores, if anything stood out today. And again, thank you all so much to everybody that's been taking the time to chime into the latest of Mets land, as the Mets unfortunately dropped this one again by a final score of 14-2. We're beyond frustrated. We're beyond fed up. And we just want to see the Mets again play good baseball again. It has not been a fun stretch the past week of games at all. And it has went a lot in hand, unfortunately, with Edwin Diaz being suspended. Nick Morabito goes 2 for 4 today there, as the Brooklyn Cyclones won 8-3. So it appears that almost if the St. Lucie Mets won today, every Mets minor league team won today, but the Mets, not so much. Morabito 2 for 4 with 3 runs scored and an RBI, 286 average, 742 OPS in the season. Morabito has been really awesome this year that we've seen for the Cyclones. Nothing else really to make note of there. It was a bullpen game that we saw by the Cyclones today too. So now let's head into the Port St. Lucie Mets and see if there's anything there on the box score, and then we will wrap up today's discussion. And for the Port St. Lucie Mets, they lost today. So they were just like the New York Metropolitans. They lost today, this time by a final score of 0-3. They lost to, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of the opposing team, and that's okay. On the offensive end, anything stand out here? Nope. Whole lot of nothing. Whole lot of nothing. On the pitching end? Nope. Whole lot of nothing as well, folks. So that is going to do it there on the nightly WardyNYM Farm Report. And on the Mets front, they just need to get themselves a victory tomorrow against Bailey Falter. Even this series, again, if you're not going to win this road trip, if you're not going to win this 4-game set the way you didn't win your 4-game set against the Nationals, the least you can do is split this one. It's very much still within the realm of doing, and we saw the Pirates, again, unleash a lot of offense today. Hopefully they unleashed a lot of bullets today for very little to do tomorrow, so we'll see what happens then. Do you still think we buy at the deadline? Yes, I think the Mets still buy and sell at the deadline. I am even as confident to say that even if the Mets sell at the deadline with the intent that they're not going to be buying for 2025, I have a confidence level to a degree that the Mets will buy in an area, especially rotation, that they may consider for beyond 2025. Do not be shocked if the Mets part ways with some farm talent at the deadline. They do look for some controllable talent, whether it's starting pitching or whether it's even on the offensive ball that we simply aren't bearing in mind right now. All I know is when it comes to the Mets and their approach to the deadline is far from being sold on the notion of, oh, we're completely selling or we're completely buying. They're going to be doing both right now. And unless the Mets find themselves again like 10 games below 500 by the deadline where they were a month plus ago, they will more than likely find themselves again in that category, still pushing for said wildcard spot. Let's see. No, dude, the Mets are flying. They're cooked, all right, Priest. We'll see what happens in the coming days then, right? But guys and gals, that's going to do it for the live show. Thank you all so much for watching. Mets lose a frustrating one, to say the least, and they look to get back to their winning ways tomorrow. Until then, have a fantastic rest of your night, day, evening, whenever you're watching this. And this is your boy, Wardy, signing out. Let's go, Mets, baby.